Okay, guys, I think that we should start a little bit. We'll start as always with a short introduction. I'm Misha and Sophia. Well, we are hosting today's meetup. This meetup is organized by R9 Research Community. We are originally from Ukraine, but currently we have a full right to say that we're international research community because recently we have one more city with us, which is Berlin. So whoever is in Berlin or plan to go there, please, you could find our fellow researchers or people who are interested in research there. One more comment, please, who haven't done that, follow us on LinkedIn and please join our Telegram chat. Normally we have discussions in Ukrainian there, but if you'd like to jump in with English, with questions or comments in English, please, you are more than welcome to do that as well. Wow, we have so many updates. I don't even know whether I will be able to cover all of them, but we also have a YouTube channel. Great latest videos over the past 2 weeks. We have newest podcast with the researcher from Better Meetup, and as well a new format which is called Допитлива Sophia or Curious Sophia. So we are discussing there examples of quantitative UX research in different companies. So please join that as well and leave your comments and initiate the discussion and support the discussion there as well. Today we are having another international guest, our speaker, Marta. She's located in Spain, Madrid, and today we will be hearing from her a little bit about research for voice user interfaces. There are a lot of discussion around that lately, a lot of things about voice user interface designers, but maybe a little bit less information than we would like to see about research for voice user interfaces. So really curious to know more about that. And Marta, please, scene is yours. And let's start.
Great, thank you, Misha. Super happy to be here today. So welcome everyone to this talk about, as Misha has introduced, UX research for voice user interfaces. We're going to be talking about challenges that we might face in this kind of newest scenarios, which can be turned into opportunities, different ways of working or methodologies. So yeah, it is obviously a topic that fascinates me. So I could be talking about this for hours. I'm sure you don't want that. But here we will have a summary of some things that in my experience I have found that they are remarkable and yeah, worth sharing. So I hope that you enjoy it. Just to have a brief introduction about myself. I've been in the research discipline for the last 13 years. I started researching more as a design researcher for physical products, fast-moving consumer goods, specifically for Procter & Gamble. So things like washing powder, toothpaste, diapers, always the most glamorous products. And then I moved into a more digital products. So with VStack IB, it was more about broadcasting. It was more about idea management within a large corporation. And then in 2016, I joined Telefónica to lead the UXR department for Aura, their virtual assistant, which along the way, it was launched in 6 countries, and that is the focus of the experience that I'm going to be sharing today. I was there for 6 years, so plenty of research going on. And alongside, I am also a lecturer for UX research and innovation at UDIT University here in Madrid. And a year, almost and a half ago, I joined Amazon, which has been also a super rich experience. Just to get started, how many of you currently use or have ever used a virtual assistant? You can just say yes in the chat, just to have an idea. Yeah, some hands. If even if not many people have, yeah, there they are coming. I was like, oh my god, nobody's using them anymore. When we were talking about this in 2016, like, it was not that popular. Actually, along the years, what it was super interesting was that for the recruitment agency that we were using, as time was passing, every time it was easier and easier and easier to recruit users that were using any of these virtual assistants, the major ones, Alexa, Siri, Bixby, Google Assistant, in our case, Aura. So it is something that, yeah, the last few years we are seeing a higher adoption, an ongoing adoption as well. Starting from the beginning, we know that virtual assistants have an AI-driven technology. So just to start with the main concepts, what do we mean when we talk about artificial intelligence, which is super trendy since ChatGPT and things like that? With artificial intelligence, what we are trying to do is to inject intelligence in technology. So what we want them is to imitate our innate functions, the innate functions of our brains. So we want them to be able to detect when something is a joke, when something is ironic. We want them to learn from the things that we are teaching them. We want them to be able to have that capacity, that capability of solving problems, which is something that as human beings, it's something that we are born with. But in the case of machines, it's something that we have to teach them to start doing. But science fiction has a lot to do with artificial intelligence, because we have all these dystopian movies in which machines took the first opportunity to destroy humanity. So that has not made a very good publicity for artificial intelligence. In this case, we have Hall from 2009, Space Odyssey. And it seems like, well, there is this fear about this kind of technology. However, when we talk about artificial intelligence nowadays, it's not those evil machines, but every time that we are using Google Maps, Apple Maps, and it's telling us a distance, artificial intelligence is the technology that is behind it. Every time that Netflix suggests us or recommend us a movie or a TV show in which they say like it's a 90% accurate according to your taste, or when Amazon suggests us other products that you might be interested in, they are using artificial intelligence behind it. So it has entered our lives in a more subtle and quiet way, not in that evil way, or at least it seems like that. And rewinding to voice user interfaces, when we talk about Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, Bixby, we think that it is something super innovative. It's an emerging technology. It's last 10 years kind of technology. But the reality is that since the 1950s, so 75 years ago, researchers, engineers, etc., they've been trying to teach machines to understand our language and to have conversations. One example that I really like is ELIZA. ELIZA was a program designed in MIT in 1966, 1967. And what they wanted is to create this virtual assistant that had a few commands that could reply when people were commenting on things. and emulated a psychologist, a psychotherapist, as we can see here. If we have a look at the conversation, this example of the conversation, they are always bugging us about something or other. Can you think of an example? Elisa says, my boyfriend made me come here, says the user. And Eliza answers, it is important to you that your boyfriend made you come here. He says, I'm depressed much of the time. I'm sorry to hear what you are depressed. It's true, I'm unhappy. Can you explain what made you unhappy? What can we see here? That Eliza is repeating the words of the user, but in a way that it makes them keep adding information. So the technology behind it was not like super intelligent. Eliza was not as intelligent as our VAs nowadays, but it made people think that it was. So, as I said, this was 60 years ago. So, yeah, it is quite impressive. But for us, as researchers, when we are used to research about certain things and then artificial intelligence, voice interaction comes into our daily lives, what changes for us and in our discipline or as user UX researchers? Many things. It is a complete game changer. It changes the paradigm because it changes the topics that we research about that are many of them are very new, are very different from the ones that we are used to, where we research about, how we research about it, how others, our peers, research about it, and all the knowledge that gets generated. So these are some of the questions that we are gonna unpack in this presentation. So the evolution of research, I can talk about it from my personal experience. I started researching about products, physical products. So in that case, we had something tangible, something that users could smell, could touch, could hear, could sense, could even taste. But we moved from that physicality to a more abstract concept, technology. When we started researching with websites, with applications, etc., where we had these interfaces that were visual or graphical. So that was like the first wave that changed our paradigm in UX research. And the second one is that once we had and we were accustomed to this technology having these visual and graphic interfaces, voice interaction came into the picture. And in that case, we had to adapt to understanding people one more time, because conversations is not something that we were used to research about. It was more like we had more clear endpoints. We wanted someone to get into an app and be able to purchase I don't know, a computer, and there were several steps. There were some visual components. We had some icons, buttons, etc., etc. But how is that change when we have a virtual assistant? Imagine that has the same use case about helping people to purchase something. How is that changing when there is no visual aid, but only a voice and a conversation? When we enter into this field, or at least in my experience, there were some concepts that I didn't take into account at the beginning. It didn't occur to me. But when people use virtual assistants and voice user interfaces, they have to build trust in the relationship that they generate with these virtual assistants. So how do we build trust with a VA, with only a voice, with a virtual assistant that many people use at the same time? Something that changes as well is the recurrence. With VAs, we want people to use our virtual assistant not once a week, once a month. We want them to use it several times a day. We want them to be engaged with it. So how can we keep that our users motivated with the use cases, with the conversations, everything else, to have that recurrent experience? Other concepts like transparency, privacy, something that in the last few years, from time to time, there is always a scandal with the big companies about leak of conversations and things like that with their virtual assistants. But it is actually something essential and crucial with virtual assistants, because we are asking them for specific information. They know things about us, they listen to us. So what happens with that data that gets generated, stored, and how is it treated? The last one, for instance, is personalization. We have these virtual assistants that are used by millions of people. But then again, what I found with users is that even though they are using Siri, Google Assistant, etc., and they know that other people are using them as well, they expect a personalized experience. So it's their virtual assistant, it's my Siri, it's my Google Assistant. And because they are building this relationship and they are asking the same use cases, they expect to have not a generic conversation or experience, but something that is more ad hoc to them. And now, deep diving into specific challenges or opportunities, because they can be taken in the same, from a different point of view. How does that change invoice interaction for us in UX research? First of all, as an emerging discipline, now we are having more. But for instance, when I started, it was very difficult to find processes, tools, academic research about UX research and the methodologies that could be used for this kind of voice interaction, because companies were not publishing anything. So obviously you could see what your competitors were doing, but they were not publishing anything. So it was very difficult. What did I do then? I started looking at, okay, what are the closest disciplines that could be related? So, for instance, for academic research, it was easier to find human-computer interaction papers. It was more focused on the technology side, while as obviously as UX researchers, we have a clear focus on our users and the experience that it gets generated. But it was a starting point. Something important as well in this aspect is that when we talk about AI, voice user interfaces, there is the technology weights a lot, like when engineers, developers, the algorithms, the data scientists, all of these roles, obviously they are very important. But there was a lack of information about, okay, but what about the user that is using this technology? So I took it as an opportunity to explore, to experiment with technology. So it was actually an exciting moment to be super creative in the field of research. And looking at these other methodologies. So, for instance, when I was doing this was like a 1 year research study for building Aura's personality. I don't know if you have tried different virtual assistants. You can see the differences among them, because each of them has a different personality, and that is something that has been a conscious decision by the company. So when I started doing the research for the personality of Aura, obviously what I saw is that not Amazon, not Google, not Apple, nobody was sharing any information about that. So it was a blank page. So one of the things within all the activities that took place that year was to get users to explain and to define what were the personalities of the virtual assistants that they were using. So what I did was to look at other disciplines. Okay, if we don't have how to build personality for a virtual assistant methodologies, let's try what other things have personalities. And I found, okay, brands have a personality, communications have a personality. And I came across these two different frameworks. The first one is Acker's attributes, in which you can see how a personality can be broken down into specific attributes. She says, honest, daring, reliable, intelligent, charming, tough, etc., etc. And I wanted to ask users if they had to define the personality of the virtual assistants that they were using, which of these attributes were more close to them. On the other side, we have Young's archetypes. In this case, we have more kind of characters, so you can really picture them as a specific people. So we have the creator, the innocent, the sage, the lover. So you can even see in some visualizations of this framework that one is visualized as the Dalai Lama, one is Harry Potter, one is Marilyn Monroe. So it can give you like a nice picture about the personality of those characters. In this case, what I did was to ask a set of users to define their virtual assistants according to Young's archetypes, a set of users with Acker attributes, and then to cross them to see if they were coming to the same conclusions. Fortunately, it did. So it was a fantastic starting point to have specific frameworks that we could that will allow us to build the personality of Aura. Secondly, from a research point of view, with voice user interfaces, something that it was completely new was the fact that it's a conversation. So it is something that I have never thought before. Like, what is a conversation? What does it entitle? What are the expectations from a conversation? So it was something that my memories about learning about conversations were from school, when we were learning about who sends the message, who receives it, what is the channel, very basic things, but not exactly in this case. I had to think about a lot of questions. What are users' expectations about a conversation with a piece of technology? Do they want to have this extensive information? No. What is the cognitive load that our users are able to absorb when speaking with a virtual assistant? What is the attention span that we have to retain the information that the virtual assistant is telling us? How does the conversation change, also depending on the channel that the user is talking to the virtual assistant? So a lot of questions on this side, but something that I found more challenging, and I think it's a challenge still today, is what happens when we allow these virtual assistants to call someone on behalf of us and having a conversation on behalf of us, and how do we, allow them to have this decision making process. In 2018, Google CEO presented a demo of a concept that was called Google Duplex, in which Google Assistant, the virtual assistant, was able to call on behalf of the user to make an appointment for a hair salon, to make a reservation for dinner. And before we discuss what happened and the implications that this has, let me share with you just a second. How was that conversation? So you can really see what Google was thinking on.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a woman's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15.
Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.?
Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for?
Just a woman's haircut for now.
Okay, we have a 10 o'clock.
10 a.m. is fine.
Okay, what's her first name?
The first name is Lisa.
Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. Have a great day. Bye.
So that was the conversation with the actual virtual assistant. Does that raise any questions for you? What you have just listened to? When I heard that, let me see. The first name is Lisa. Yeah, the name of the user displaying that information. But I was thinking like, oh my God. So has the user asked the virtual assistant to make this call? Or has the virtual assistant called because the virtual assistant thinks that Lisa hasn't been to the hairdresser for a very long time and maybe she needs a change of look. You have seen as well that, it could be super useful for the recruitment in scheduling interviews. And she doesn't say, the assistant doesn't say that is a piece of technology. It doesn't say that it's Google Assistant. So actually, the receptionist at the hair salon might think that he's talking to an actual person. Is that right, wrong? Is it ethical? When we are talking to technology, should we be aware of the fact that we are talking to technology or that we are talking to a human being? So we could have like all of these questions. What happened with Google? That actually sometime after, I don't know if people made those questions as well or they thought themselves this, but they made these changes. So now what it was called Google Duplex, now it's called Duplex AI, and it was launched in 2022, last year. Oh, no, we're in 2024 already, 2 years ago in the UK. And now the assistant has to claim that you are talking to me, a virtual assistant. I'm Google Assistant. And it also claims that the conversation is being recorded. Because obviously Google engineers and everyone over there, they use those conversations to train the model and to help it improve over time. So now they have to claim this. However, even if Google Duplex was first presented in 2018, it was deployed a couple of years ago, there are still a lot of things that are not clear about the ethical guidelines when using AI and virtual assistants. We have some in Europe, but there are still some loose ends for companies and some gaps in knowledge. So from our point of view as UX researchers, what I think is that we have to play a key role when we are researching and we are talking to our users about those ethical barriers and what are the expectations that they have, how this technology should work with this kind of situation, so we can provide them with a better experience with the technology. A few months ago, Amazon had this demo with Alexa, in which the last year's boom was a large language model. So now these virtual assistants are able to have like way more information that they used to have, and they are able to have more context. So in this case, we can see on the screen, how's my favorite football team doing? Asks the user. And Alexa automatically knows who is the favorite football team. It was not because Alexa sent the user a questionnaire about give me all this information, but because over time it's learning about the concept, the context, and what the user is actually asking a lot of times. So it saves that piece of information. So in this case, Amazon doesn't go as far or with this radical approach as Google, but is using this knowledge storage in the virtual assistant to provide with a better experience. I have talked to users and they get really annoyed when they are like, okay, every time I have to ask for the same thing and Alexa asks me, but what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, I ask you every week about the same football team, or I ask you about the same TV program that I love to watch. So this is used to enhance the experience that users are having with the virtual assistant. A third challenge or interesting anecdote is that for us human beings, as soon as we hear a voice, we attribute a personality to it. So when we call to a call center and we talk to someone that is helping us, unconsciously we imagine that person. So we think, is this person old or is it young? Is it about my age? Does it seem nice or is it very rude? It seems like it's having a nice day or a bad day. I don't know, things like that. And it happens the same with virtual assistants. So even if we are only listening to a voice, unconsciously we think about the personality behind it. And so companies have to build it. I don't know if you remember the movie Her from Spike Jones, in which the virtual assistant for Joaquin Phoenix here had the voice of Scarlett Johansson. You didn't see her; you were only seeing the orange square, the lines moving when she was talking to modulate the voice. But obviously, if you were listening to that voice, you knew that virtual assistant was very sexy. And it was only a voice that was behind it. But it is something that it's a conscious decision that the companies have to make also to translate the tone and the personality of the virtual assistant. In the case of Siri, here we have some interesting examples also about the barriers that we can push the virtual assistants towards. Another big chunk of my research was to consider all the small talk that users would expect to have with a virtual assistant. We might think that they are, in my case, Telefónica is a telecoms company with video streaming services, so people could ask for their billing for their mobile phones, or they could ask for the I want to watch a Brad Pitt movie, or my Wi-Fi connection is not properly working at home. So we have the typical use cases that we would be expecting, but we know that users don't ask only what do you expect from them. So here we have some examples from Siri. So you can tell Siri, I don't like your voice, and she answers, thank you. I'm glad you like my dulcet tones. Or you are making me angry. I wonder what's that like, being mad. So this is all something that has been thought by the team. And this is my favorite one. I'm naked. I don't understand what you mean by naked, or at least I'm going to pretend that I don't. This shows intelligence behind it because it is being ironic. It is something that people were expecting users to ask this question, and they have thought about what could be an interesting response. So when researching about the small talk for virtual assistants, I had to research like, okay, how should Aura respond when people insult it and say like, you're stupid, or when they say what is your favorite football team, which is something very compromising in Spain. Or what about if they ask about religion, or they ask inappropriate questions of even if they ask for a porn movie. So that is something that needs to be taken into account. And there was also a super interesting story, Siri. I don't remember if it was also in 2019 or around there, 2019, 2020, that they changed Siri's personality and voice. So I was talking to a heavy user of Siri in a test, and she told me, "Oh my God, I don't like since they have changed the voice and now it's very rude, it's very ironic, very witty. I don't think it's educational for my kids, so I have forbid my kid to keep using it." So even if we are talking to virtual assistants, the way that they are embedded into the lives of our users, into their daily lives, their habits, they are teaching children's manners as well. So in this case, the user was super disappointed that they had made this change toward a more teenage, witty kind of personality, and it decreased the interactions from this user. Linked to this a little bit, we have also a tendency to anthropomorphize technology. So we tend to imagine these robots with faces, with arms, with legs, everything to seem as human-like as possible, or at least something that we can relate to. The typical Japanese robots that are dogs, cats, and things like that are very typical because we feel more comfortable with things that are similar to the ones that we see in real life. Linked to this, Microsoft, a few years later, they stopped doing this and they only visualize Cortana with these two blue circles. But at the beginning, when they launched their virtual assistant, it was this lady. It was a female. It was a naked woman, very voluptuous. So when people were talking with Cortana in their Microsoft computers, that is the body and the kind of visualization that they were having in their minds. Obviously, they pivoted and changed direction, but this is something that they started doing at the beginning to have this very human-like personalization of the virtual assistant. And in 2020 as well, Q was launched. It is a voice that is made artificially, and it is the first genderless voice for virtual assistants. This is very interesting because obviously when we have the voice of our virtual assistants, there is usually A or B, so a female voice or a male voice. But before we get into that, let's watch this short video as well, just for you to share as well. What do you think about this voice?
Just using a small pause while we are waiting for the video. Don't hesitate to share your questions, especially regards the research around voice user interface. We will definitely discuss everything in the end.
Hi, I'm Q, the world's first genderless voice assistant. Think of me like Siri or Alexa, but neither male nor female. I'm created for a future where we are no longer defined by gender, but rather how we define ourselves. My voice was recorded by people who neither identify as male nor female, and then altered to sound gender neutral, putting my voice between 145 and 175 Hz. a range defined by audio researchers. But for me to become a third option for voice assistants, I need your help. Share my voice with Apple.
Well, I will stop this because it's when the when Q starts asking for publicity and things like that. This was technically the first genderless voice. When we showed that to users as an experiment, when we were looking for Aura's voice, it was interesting because their mental model is that they were not used to genderless voices. So for some of them, this voice seemed like a female voice, and for some of them seemed like a male voice. This is an exception because most of the companies that have different voices, they have female or male. When we researched for Aura, it was interesting that our users prefer to have more robotic voices with mistakes that were female rather than the male ones, even if they were of a higher quality. The reason behind it is because they thought that the female voices were warmer, they were calmer, and those were attributes that they valued in a virtual assistant, while they considered that the male voices were more serious or more authoritarian. There is a lot of controversy on this topic about virtual assistants having female voices and names that being sexist. I have found research saying opposite things. So obviously for some this is sexist. On other pieces of research and journals, I found that in some countries the default voice of the main virtual assistants, it is male voices, because they think that a woman cannot be smart enough, so they prefer the virtual assistants to be male voices. So we have these opposite opinions. What are companies doing about this? You have a default voice, female or male, depending on the country. For instance, Siri in the UK is a male voice, but when you go to settings, you can change it. So this controversy sometimes it's caused because people have not discovered that they can actually change to their taste the voice of the virtual assistant. But it is something also interesting to consider. Obviously, researching about voice was fascinating because it was about the pitch, it was about the pauses, it was about the different tones, intonations, if it's a question, if it's a claim, what happens if I'm calling super angry because my bill is not right. So, yeah, a lot of little things that needed to be adjusted to have a better quality voice. And another thing is that we expect the technology and these voice user interfaces to be rather human, right? We want them to understand when we are telling a joke, or we even want them to tell a joke. And all of these things, we want them to be able to recite a poem, all of these things. But this is not endless. There is a point in which we reject and feel this repulsion, this creepiness, when technology reaches a human-like point. There is this theory that is called the uncanny valley. It was developed by Masamiro Mori in Japan in the 1970s. He was a robotics professor. And what he found was that we want technology to seem human, but at some point when we are able to detect something, an error, something that is not working, and we feel cheated, what I was mentioning, for instance, at the beginning, imagine that when the receptionist at the hair salon was talking to Google Assistant, thinking that she was talking to a person, and suddenly there was a mistake or something that made her thought that, oh my God, this is a machine, this is a robot, this is an IVR. There is a moment of rejection and repulsion and creepiness that, yeah, messes up with all our experience. And it has to be very, very perfect to avoid this kind of valley in which the experience goes horrible. I don't know if you know her. She's quite popular. She's Sophia from Hanson Robotics. She's been going around as well for a few years. She has given interviews in TV shows, in, in TV news around the world. She has made the cover for some fashion magazines as well. She's very photogenic. And her conversation is impressive. It's very realistic. But what happens with Sophia, that sometimes she's speaking and she's saying something, and you stop feeling that it is a robot, and suddenly one of her eyes goes like the other way that it should go, or it makes like a strange gesture in the face, and suddenly you are like, oh my God, she's creepy, she's creepy. So she's an interesting example in this case. Also, when someone asks Sophia if she wants to finish to eliminate humans, she says yes. So that is not something also interesting and nice to hear from her. But she envisions this part of sometimes when you feel that something, a piece of technology is very, very real, but at some point it's something that it doesn't click. And yeah, you feel that you were being tricked some way. And finally, we have to consider multiple scenarios and how to maintain the ethics. I introduced to this a few slides ago. Our users are not going to ask the virtual assistant only the use cases that we have carefully prepared with the questions, the answers, the flow, the dialogue flow, everything. They're going to ask completely crazy things, and that is something that we have to consider. There is also an interesting insight, and is that at the beginning of the experience with virtual assistants, users like to test the intelligence, so they want to ask things that are not related at all, just to see if the virtual assistant is smart enough to understand them. And then they play around. They don't do as much later, and then they start using it for the purpose that it was designed. But at the beginning, they like to play and to test where are the limits of the virtual assistant, and how to maintain the ethics, because we have to consider all the maybe not nicest things that users are gonna use the virtual assistant for, or how are they gonna do it. Microsoft launched Tai a few years ago in Twitter. They had this idea about users teaching Tai things about the world, about society, everything, and she would learn from them. So it was this very idealistic idea of this experiment. I think they didn't have UX researchers in the team, because obviously a UX researcher would have said like, I think we should test this with a few users before we launch it in Twitter. And what happened was that people were really trolls. So they were saying very nasty things to Tai, homophobic, xenophobic, everything. And unfortunately, that is what Tai learned. So she started making these unpleasant comments as well. And at some point, Microsoft had to disconnect it. So the team had a more optimistic consideration of users teaching the virtual assistants than the one that they had actually. You would be super surprised by how much people insult virtual assistants. When you see behind the scenes in product analytics,
Vale.
Sorry, Siri just got activated. Sorry. If you see behind the scenes in product analytics, what kind of requests people make to the virtual assistants, insults are really high. So that is something that when we are researching about VAs, it's something that we have to take into account. And what do we want the virtual assistant to answer in those kind of situations? So just to wrap up, what I would like you to leave this presentation with, just 3 final ideas. Even if when we are talking about AIs, voice user interfaces, virtual assistants, obviously the technology is a huge part of it, and plenty of technical roles as developers, engineers, data scientists, etc., are going to be involved. The role of the UX researcher is super important, because this is not a kind of technology that just because we can do it, we should do it, but it's something that users are going to use directly. So it's not something that is just an algorithm over there, but they are going to be talking to these technologies. So the understanding of those conversations, expectations, how the behaviors change a long time. Obviously, people are not using the virtual assistants in the same way in 2016 than they are doing it in 2024, because they have a more mature experience with them, their wishes, their ideas for the future, the use cases that they are using are very different. So we really need to understand the users and the change in the trend, in the discipline, everything. So if you join or you are currently working in a team, and you researched about voice interaction, fight for your place and your role, because it is really something important. I have involved plenty of data scientists, developers, etc., into listening to the as observers in the user testing, and it was amazing, because they were like, oh my God, I didn't think that people talk that way. They were just writing down the way that they thought that people were going to ask the questions about those use cases, but it was nothing like it was in real life. So it is very beneficial for them to be involved in these kind of activities. Secondly, as mentioned at the beginning, voice are super intangible experiences. So we have to change the paradigm. It's not the same to do usability testing about an app than doing a usability testing with a voice interaction. We have to take into account other things because there is not this visual aid. So obviously there are things that we have to adapt about our modus operandi and our methodologies, but linked to the third point, it is a fascinating discipline, and it really helps us to be creative, to test things. It is a blank page in which we can play, we can test things. If it doesn't work, we will try in another way, experiment, and I think it gives a lot of a rich opportunity for us in UX research to make contributions to the field and the experimentation. Okay, so that was all from my part. Thank you very much all for listening, and I think now we can move on to the questions.
Marta, thank you so much. Super interesting. It seems like everyone on the call was also really amused with some of the examples that you've provided. As I've already mentioned in the beginning, we are encouraging all of you to join with your questions and comments with camera and voice. We have a list of questions. If someone would like to jump in with a question straight away, please go for that. If no, we'll start with the questions from the chat. Yeah, we have a raised hand. Please.
Hi, thanks, Marta. This was very great. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how UX research can help in how we make these tools inclusive, from like a culture and how people communicate culturally point of view.
That is a great question. Actually, we have to take into account the different ways that people talk. When I was saying before, like when you start talking about conversations, it's like, okay, how does this work? But the virtual assistant has to be able to understand dialects, slang, people talk in very different ways. It has to be inclusive in the way of a kid uses the language in a certain way, or elderly use the language in a certain way, not maybe someone super techy, super young with a lot of vocabulary. For many people, when they start using the technology, they don't know how to elaborate the sentences, because the commands, the requests, because they are used to press a button, and that is the way that they are used to do things. So understanding the way that people talk and learning, teaching the virtual assistant to be able to understand all of that. So whether people speak with keywords, if they speak with well-structured sentences, if they make complex sentences or that take a long time, that is something that we tested regularly with different set of users to see that. Something that we did a lot as well was that when you have the virtual assistant launch it already, you have plenty of information in analytics. So seeing behind the scenes, actually, what are the commands that people are asking the virtual assistant, and you can see if the virtual assistant has replied in the correct way. So if it's been able to understand those requests. If it doesn't, that is something that we inform the linguistics, the data scientists, for them to train the model for the virtual assistant to be able to understand. In the case of Spain, just to give an example, it is interesting because we have different accents and dialects and languages across Spain. So it is very different from the way that someone from the north speaks, that someone from the south, the accent. So we had to train the virtual assistant to be able to understand both. But that is a great question because it's something that not everyone talks the same, whether that is by age, technology usage, the territory, or the mother tongue. So, yeah.
Thank you. We have one more raised hand. Please unmute and you could go with the question.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful lecture of yours. My name is Keshav. I want to ask about the cultural difference with respect to conversations we have. And also, I want to ask about the gender issue. For example, different tone, different gender. How do we understand Europe in UK is more comfortable for it? Male, India is comfortable for female, Japan is comfortable for neutral. And do we have this terminology for our other countries? Next is about the Japanese robotics teacher you was talking about. So, as far as I am able to understand, if the virtual assistant is more about human-like, it would scare me. If it's more like robotic, it is not more trustworthy. So, what is the thin line, and how do we find out that thin line as a UXR?
It is a very, very fine line. So for the boys, we tested different set of voices to see like what was the level of robotic voice that users were able to accept versus the more very high human-like quality voices. And it was interesting that at the beginning, when users were starting to use virtual assistants, they didn't want it to be super human. So they wanted to make sure that they were talking to a machine. So even if it was not that perfect, they prefer to have those little mistakes, errors, to make sure that they were talking to a technology. So the uncanny valley was very present. Across time, it is true that users have been feeling more comfortable with virtual assistants, and we can see that the voices with Alexa, with Google Assistant, they have the intonation that is marvelous, and is very human-like. Like the technology that is behind it, they have been working a lot on that. So it was more like a challenge of emerging technology at the beginning, and when users started using it, gaining this trust in the virtual assistant, they were more comfortable with more human-like voices.
Did we respond to the question?
I actually have a follow-up. Can I go forward?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
it's about so it's about the culture issue like I'm having. So do we have anything to understand about the culture of geographical locations? For example, which language should we go? Sorry, which tone we should go for? Male, female, which gender, a neutral gender? Like you give us an example of Q. So do we have anything for
We
region specific?
Aura was launched in 6 countries: Brazil, Argentina, Chile, UK, Germany, and Spain. So we had 2 Anglo-Saxon countries, one South Europe, and Brazil, which is a country with a very specific culture, and Latin American countries. So when we were building the personality, we built it globally. So we wanted to know what would be the common things or the differences that the different countries might have. So the design of the personality was global, but then it was adapted to with some things like small talk to different countries. If in Brazil you asked Ora about the carnival, she was able to tell you things about the carnival, but that didn't make sense in the UK, or maybe in the UK or Germany, they didn't want Aura to have like a great sense of humor because they wouldn't expect that from a virtual assistant, while in other countries they did. So what we did was to explore what was the common ground uh, of the personality that could be applicable to these different cultures, and we tested that, and then we left these small parts for every country, and the teams of Aura in those countries that were developing all the language and the information behind it to be able to make those adjustments to personalize more into the idiosyncrasy of the country. In terms of the gender, in the 6 countries, the female voice was the chosen one.
If you don't mind, I would also like to follow up on that. And it seems like there is a lot of work that should be done not only by researchers, or at least not specifically with only interviews or usability testing. I was wondering whether your team used to partner with other, let's call them neighboring subject matter experts, maybe psychologists, anthropologists, culturologists, just to get maybe like the expert interviews or the expert point of view. So yeah, if you could comment more on that, please.
For conversations and that kind of knowledge, we had a UX writer in the team. So she was the one able to translate when we were researching about the personality and the tone of voice. How does it translate into actual phrases, responses? So we work very closely the research with UX writing to be able to develop guidelines for the different countries that they would follow. So something that was very structured. We work closely as well with linguistics So people in the team that had a background in literature, language, and all of that, to be able to build as well the questions, the answers, everything behind the conversation for Aura. Unfortunately, we didn't have as Google that we read in some articles that they were having like screenwriters or journalists or writers themselves into the teams for this kind of projects. We were a smaller team, but what we did was we were doing secondary research super frequently to know like what other people were doing, a lot of academic research. So in terms of we had a person in the team. She was the quant researcher, but her background was in psychology. So she also brought her expertise in that field when, for instance, building the personality.
Great. Thank you, Marta. We have one more raised hand. Please go on with your question.
Hey, thank you so much for this session. It's a really wonderful one. I have a couple of questions. The first one is around how reliable is AI currently when it comes to using it in our day-to-day lives? Even as a researcher, can I rely upon AI to help me with some of my work, or is it like inaccurate in its sense and it's still learning and evolving? And the follow-up to that is, if we are using so many resources to constantly train AI with different perspectives, will it totally replace humans in the future? Or like how are we seeing the future if we're constantly investing in AI? Just want to get some idea on that. Yeah.
Well, the complexity to build it, in spite of what ChatGPT has made us think. Last year, now it seems like, okay, AI is here and it's able to do plenty of things and it's very smart. But one thing is that this kind of generative AI um, um, artifacts and tools have been going on for a long time. Like we had DeepMind playing chess fantastically plenty of years ago, but and ChatGPT, you can check that it makes a lot of mistakes if you carefully test it. But when I was researching about this, it was rather step by step. Like what are the use cases that the virtual assistant is able to perform, because you are in our case you were using data from the organization. So if you have an account with a company and you are using that virtual assistant, what you would expect from the virtual assistant is to be able to go into the data, your personal data, and provide you with that personalized experience about what is going on. It's not like if you want to build a Q&A virtual assistant or chatbot, that is way easier, because it's just like, okay, question, answer, I will give you the things that I can do, and that's all. If the technology is gonna take over our jobs, I don't think I think we are still a bit far away for that. I think it's a fantastic technology that we can harness for to enhance some aspects of our work, but I don't think it still has the reasoning that we luckily humans have. So, like for UX research, it's useful for BAs, for instance. It's interesting to create utterances. So, what are the alternatives in which a user can ask a question? So that is very useful because you don't have to be writing down all the questions and thinking a lot. It's something that can be done more automatically. For generating, it's more about the conversation about the different options that users can ask for a question. using Gen AI for the different ways that you can answer a question. So you don't give always the same response to the user. So the user would think that you are not very smart, but you to the same question you can give different answers. So there are ways in which can make easier our work, but I think the hardcore of our work is something that technology cannot still. Yeah, we are still better than technology.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. One more question.
Hi, my name is Amog. I wanted to ask that since the AI that is currently generating so much hyper realistic content, so what kind of guidelines should be there to differentiate between them or stop the generation of such hyper realistic things that may harm some kind of people?
I it was breaking down a little bit. So just to make sure, did you ask about the hyperrealism of the human voice of the technology, or did you say something about the art? Can you repeat that, please?
The hyper realistic voice, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a decision that every company is choosing. I would assume that, yeah, for large companies that have yeah, a large team of UX researchers, designers, UX writers, etc., they are doing it because they have found that it's an important thing for enhancing the experience with users. I think, for instance, when we talk to virtual assistants that we know, because they come from a physical device, such a smart speaker, even if we have very hyperhuman voices, we are aware that that is a piece of technology. I think it's more controversial when we are calling, for instance, to a call center. And many years ago, when you were talking to an IVR, you knew that it was an IVR because it was very robotic. But now it might seem more realistic. So those are the situations in which, yeah, I wonder if you should acknowledge the fact that you are talking to a virtual assistant, not to a person. But there is a decision that every company is making according to what they think is best. There are no clear guidelines yet.
Thank you.
We have few minutes for a few more questions. If anyone would like to jump in, please do that.
May I?
Sure.
Yeah, I have two questions about the research specifically with like when you were trying to find out all these things about virtual assistants. I was wondering how did you research the attitude towards the voice of the virtual assistant and like I mean because we all know that the interviews could be biased and we are not always able to rely on that. Was there anything else you did to make sure people were not lying and just telling the stereotypes?
Uh, yeah, as I mentioned, there was a lot of experimentation. So, for instance, we tried once. It was really fun. We had user testing. We wanted to know how users could react when there were mistakes and errors in the experience. So, since sometimes it is difficult for obviously to have this technology implemented or to have like a valid prototype, what we did was to use WhatsApp as a conversation. We changed the icon and everything, so the user thought that they were talking to the virtual assistant, and actually the virtual assistant was one of our colleagues behind the two-way mirror. And depending on what the user was saying, this colleague could be able to reply perfectly or randomly make mistakes. So that was something that we could see like in person, like yeah, how is your reaction when something is not working. For the personality as well, what we did was to, well, as I said, it was like a huge project, so we had plenty of different activities, but we developed like 2 weeks online communities in which in each of the countries that we were, we had like 30 people, and every day we were showing them like a new layer, let's say, of the onion of the personality, for them to try web prototypes with those kind of questions. We could see in the back end what people were asking, what it was replying. They could then comment on the forum with other colleagues. How was the experience unpacking? So we were more like co-designing with them. So I have tried this. No, I don't like this kind of answer. I was expecting something different. So we could start step by step, and at the end of the 2 weeks, we created a web prototype that had what they had been asking for, to test it with them again if that was something more alike about the personality that they had asked for. But we constantly yeah, tested the evolution, and in the different activities we could do that.
Thank you. That's really interesting, like about all these processes. I love this kind of researches when you need to create some unusual solutions. I have one more questions about for their research. Like, did you eventually find any explanation why users were behaving this way when they were trying to hurt AI?
Uh, some of them were insulting the technology in this first time experience, to see like, if I tell the virtual assistant that is stupid, how is the intelligence go? Others, when they get frustrated, it's not a perfect technology, and we have seen along the years that even the huge virtual assistants have improved a lot. And still, sometimes you ask something and the virtual assistant responds a completely opposite thing. So you could see also in product analytics how people got frustrated. So you could see that maybe someone has asked the same questions several times, and the virtual assistant has said, I don't know what you're saying. I cannot understand you. I cannot do that. We need something that the user knows that it can perform. So at some point, they are like, oh my God, I hate you. You cannot do anything. Or they behave in that way when they feel frustrated. That is something that we have to consider, that people could get frustrated because whether they were not asking it in the way that the virtual assistant could understand them, the language, or that they could ask for use cases that were not currently implemented. So we have to see how to respond in those use cases, but there is frustration and bad words involved frequently in those
Okay, thank you
situations.
very much. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing, because I was wondering, like, was it some behavior like people are calling the call center just to argue with somebody, or was it like something specifically? Like, was it the
Or
reason behind?
one anecdotal situation as well is that we found was that people share that, yeah, sometimes I'm having some drinks with my friends, and one of them is like, oh, one thing that I have discovered, you can ask Google Assistant or Siri this, listen to me, blah 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 blah. So they show it to their friends, these interesting use cases or responses. And obviously, sometimes it was this kind of things like, if you tell X voice assistant that is stupid or blah, 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 it responds you in a very funny way. Listen to this, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, it was also kind of an entertainment um use case.
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, one more question question we have from?
Yeah, just to wrap up. Sure.
If you have time, I'll only then go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Go on.
Okay, so just wanted to understand how exactly the AI is currently learning to respond. So is it like having a data set of responses predefined to queries, or is it in real time improvising to responses? So like how exactly does that work?
Depend on the year that you are asking me. So the technology has changed a lot since 2016 to 2024. At the beginning, it was something very manual. I remember the first pilot that we had with Oram. It was a 2 months pilot in which we placed a tablet and a phone booth in a physical store of Telefonica, and people could come and ask questions to the virtual assistant. And we wanted to see like what kind of things people were expecting or would like to know. In those 2 months, our team taught 3,000 more questions to the virtual assistant, and that was by hand because they were the ones that users were asking for. But that was at the beginning of the story. As the technology was more unpacking and the algorithms, the models, everything, it was being more automatic. Now with large language models, I guess it has changed, but I haven't been there for a year and a half, so I couldn't tell you in 2024 how is that being conducted. But I would assume with these new larger data sets, they must be making a lot of progress in that sense.
Got it. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Marta. Thank you so much to all the participants who stayed with us till the end of the session. Really interesting discussion we had today. You are definitely more than welcome to continue that in our community.
Oh, you accidentally turned off your microphone, Misha.
Why not? Why not? Sure. I just wanted to say thanks for that call out. Just wanted to say thank you once more to everyone who stayed with us till the end of the session. A huge thank you to Marta for this really interesting and inspiring discussion around voice assistants and how we as a researcher can overcome other challenges that we have specifically to this topic. And as in the beginning, I encourage all of you to join our LinkedIn page to check on the updates and our upcoming events. So thank you once more, and see you on our next meetups.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you, Martha. Bye bye.
Thank you.